Hello everybody. Well, we're back with the front half of our 81 Escort L wagon. And we are here because we're finally getting the rest of the stuff off of this carcass before this front end goes off to scrap. So I still have to get all the suspension and the steering out of this guy, and the brakes, and the automatic transmission. But the biggest thing is probably the wiring. So I'm slowly plugging away at the wiring so that it's easier to get to the rear transmission mount. Because on these automatics, it's a pill. Anyways, this video today is going to be about the cruise control. People all the time are asking me, hey, how do I take my non-cruise car and put cruise in it? Like, well, I've actually never done it. And I've acquired cars from people who tried to do it, but somehow failed. So I really didn't know how easy or hard the set operation was. But I've pretty much removed all the cruise control system, aside from unmounting the vacuum diaphragm up front. Just so that it's there for reference when we get a little later in the video. So to start with, yes, you actually could put this in any Escort EXP, from 81 to 90, as far as I can tell. But I do need to say I don't know how well this stuff transfers over to the fuel injection cars, but it'll swap over to the carbureted cars without issue. However, another disclaimer, I can't promise that different years will swap with different years. I'm not all-encompassing knowing, but I know that everything in front of me will transfer without an issue between 81 and 83, and I'm pretty confident it will transfer into 84 through 85 and a half. It'll probably transfer over through the 86 model. Again, I'm pretty sure the carbureted system for the carbureted system is going to swap over perfect. The only hesitance I say about promising that is some of these electrical connectors will differ, and I'm pretty confident they will. Otherwise, if you can overcome that, the system should just be completely plug and play. And because of that, it should work on all the EFI models, but again, I have no idea how their wiring goes. Not the AC system, the cruise control system. This is basically universal. How it goes about mating with the speed sensors and the whole rest of the car. It might just be a simple one-for-one direct plug and play. I'm not too sure. I haven't ripped apart one of those later cars to find out. Anyways, so assuming that you have what you need to plug and play, here's everything that is required, because presumably you'll be taking these from a donor car. As a matter of fact, that's the only way to do this. Sure, you can source a couple of these parts. You might be able to find a nice new old stock steering wheel on eBay or something for like $200, and you can maybe find the cruise control module, and you can most certainly find the cruise control diaphragm, the assist diaphragm, whatever the technical term is. Because I'm pretty sure the box, but for sure the diaphragm up underneath the hood is generic Ford. It's the same across all their late 70s to late 80s models. I think it even carries over into the 90s. So sure, you might be able to find some of that stuff online. You're not going to find any of the wires that you need. And there's a few, and then you also have to know where to install all this stuff, hence the video. I'm sure that's why you're here. So the swap entails you will have to take all this from a donor car. So you need a car that has cruise control to start with, and preferably one that hasn't been dinked with. If it's a car that someone had already started parting out, you're going to be facing difficulties, because you will need every single car part I've mentioned in this video. So we will start underneath the hood. Alright, so to begin with, you will need the vacuum controller, the vacuum motor, I think they actually call it. And it's permanently attached to this cable. And part of that vacuum motor, you will need just a couple vacuum lines. And they're pretty big hoses. One will have a one-way check valve, or at least I'm pretty sure it's a one-way check valve. And that will go over to the plastic vacuum manifold. You'll use one of the ports. On all of these cars, there's more ports than you need. There's always at least one more port than you need. So cap off whatever is excess, and then you just simply remove one cap, and you will install one that goes from the side of the vacuum motor right next to the electrical connector. This is the only electric fitting on the vacuum motor itself. And then you'll have one vacuum line that goes from a kind of Y junction plastic fitting to vacuum line to your vacuum motor. You also have a vacuum coming off of that same T fitting. It'll go into this rubber grommet, which will be placed down here. You will have some sort of access hole kind of hiding behind the brake booster. So one of these access holes will be obscured by the brake booster. You will need to remove whatever grommet is there in your next car. You can see that cluster of 3. That top left one is the one that's obscured by the brake booster. The one on the far right, not too sure what that does. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong holes. This is the hole that your vacuum line will come out of, that lower one. That one definitely is obscured by the brake booster because you can't see any light through it. But it's right above the boot for the rack input. Square hole right there, that is for the throttle cable. So you'll have to remove that entire line and the grommet. You'll need that to seal it off in the car when you reinstall. And then all this, once it goes through the firewall, it comes kind of through and around the metal bracketry for the steering column. And then it all kind of bolts into place on the brake pedal assembly. So what that kind of looks like is, first, you need to make sure you retain this plastic piece. Without this, you're not really going to have cruise control. And that goes on the pin that the brake booster sits over. You'll get this, it goes on the pin like so. You simply rotate it forward and you'll hear it click into position. And once it's clicked in position, it's locked in. Now what this is used for is a stop for this vacuum switch. And that's literally all it is. You can see a little white peg in there, a stem. Well, on that stem, way down at the bottom here, we can actually see some of its function right here. As I slide this up, you can see there's an O-ring in there. As you slide it up, it seals. And if you put your finger on it and release the button, you can actually feel suction. And this is mounted on a little steel bracket. I'm going to half assemble it here. I don't want to fully assemble it, but we will half assemble it for you. It will be positioned like here, and it's on this black nipple end that your vacuum hose will go through, with its grommet through that lowest hole and out to the vacuum motor. This is the bracket I held in my hand. It's just kind of dark here. There's a couple holes on this bracket for the steering column. I'm really struggling with the light here, but you can kind of see my fingers swing past the hole, making it dark and light. That's what this bracket will go into. And the bracket is kind of situated like such, and you'll have your vacuum switch, being open and closed by the brake pedal. So we make sure we have all of that, and it will be only these couple pieces. It will be the steel bracket, a little screw. You will have a little metal collar. That is critical. Without that, you're not mounting the switch. The bracket collar, it clicks into place on the metal bracket, and then your plastic switch will thread in and out of it. But it's also designed to be pushed through if, because when you're setting this up, and there's a method for setting it up, you have to run it in a bunch. So it's easier to take it out, slide it up a whole bunch, and then click it into place, and then you can thread your plastic piece left and right until it's working the way you need. So that kind of takes care of all the vacuum system as far as the cruise control goes. The next step is addressing the speedometer cable. Now for your cruise control to work, you will need this small section of speedometer cable, as well as the Hall effect sensor here too. This is how the cruise control electronic module knows what speed you're going. Well, it's relative. It knows what speed the transmission is outputting. Okay, so you need the short little whip, and this will thread into the transmission, and you can kind of see that shiny little threaded fitting down there. That's where our speedometer cable goes to. So you will unthread it lefty-loosey from the transmission, and then up here you will lefty-loosey this from the rest of the transmission speedometer cable that goes up to the tack. That springy end with the white plastic collar that goes to on the tack side, and down here with the nut, that's what goes down to our transmission side. I'll double check in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that this speedometer cable is the same between the cruise control cars and the not cruise control cars. And the reason I'm confident, like 99.9%, is because when you are taking out the gauge cluster on a cruise control car, you get that much more length to play with, to get the cluster out. The biggest thing keeping the cluster from coming all the way out is your speedometer cable. So when you unthread the metal end down at the transmission, your entire cluster can come all the way out. With a cruise control car, sometimes you don't need to do that. You can, simply pull it out. You'll have 5-6 more inches than the normal car would have to play with. But even if you do need to remove the cable, it's extremely easy to, because now you can unthread this nut for the speedometer cable up here instead of reaching all the way down to the transmission, because honestly the best way to access that down there at the transmission is to be literally under the car. And it's kind of a chore, but it's by far the best way, perhaps the only way to do it. But the other nice thing is, this whip adds like 6 inches onto the access point. So then suddenly you're only reaching for it right about here, kind of next to just below to the left of the brake booster. So it makes it way easier to service your gauge cluster that way. So once you have that set aside, now we are off to the actual wiring. So that speed sensor, it has a connector. You will leave this in place. The connector attaches to some wires. The other end of wires goes to your vacuum motor, connects here. On the end opposite of your grommet, this goes inside the car. And then this, again, sticks through the car. I believe in that top left hole. No, that's all rusty. So nothing was there. Whatever plug was there has been missing on this car. So that top right hole on the outside of the firewall, if you're on the inside of the firewall, it will be that top left hole. Your grommet will rest in there, and your gray connector cable, it's got 8 pins, that will go to this, and this will be resting somewhere underneath the dashboard on the driver's side. It'll be pretty close to where our vacuum switch for the brake was. You know, the one that we had shown on the brake pedal. Now, so all this is kind of ranged up in there. But before we get too far, there is a brake switch on the brake pedal itself too. You will see this also on the pin for the brake booster. This whole arrangement kind of just wraps itself around the brake booster. You know, the brake booster arm, because it has to be on the brake pedal pin. So here's where things get pretty neat. Your factory non-cruise control car will already have a connector. It's exactly this. It's a very long cable, goes to the rest of the loop. This will attach to the brake switch. Excuse me. We're sitting down because we're going to be down here for a little while. Here we go. So this is the non-cruise control connector. But on your cruise control unit, you will have an identical connector that needs to take its place. Now hold on to the stock one, the original one from the car, because you will also need to plug it into this. So the cruise control system, it automatically, or I shouldn't say automatically, the cruise control system, it inserts itself into the car. And that's kind of what makes this a direct install. Basically a perfect bolt-on operation. So this comes off your brake switch, goes into here. And then somewhere along your cruise control loom will be a male portion, identical to what you had just removed on your car. Plug that onto your brake switch. And now half of the electrical work is done. This unit, I do not know what this is for at all. You can see it's just a connector for itself on the cruise control unit. So my guessing is that this green wire may be a fusible link. It does not say so, and it's literally only wire, so it's probably something of the matter like 2 amps or something next to nothing. Alright, and then taped up here will be this connector. It's got 2 red wires going into it. I honestly don't know where it goes, and I really don't think it was actually plugged into anything at all, because the spade is perfectly clean and the plastic is completely yellowed inside and out. I know on camera it looks more white than it is, but in person it's awfully yellow. But it's still got the same fade on the inside, so I doubt this was actually plugged into anything, and I couldn't find anything else on the car that it should have been plugged into. So we'll keep going. This is the next piece of the puzzle. This is your cruise control module. This will simply be bolted. I'm sure I'm holding this upside down. Here we go. This will be bolted right around here-ish, directly below the steering column. You can't miss it. To do any of this operation here today, you will have to remove whatever plastic panels underneath if you have an 81 to 83. And as soon as you remove that, because the only 2 screws that hold that on are on this little bracket. So as soon as you remove that, you'll see this, your unit, your module. So that bolts in there like such. So you can see I've just left it on the chunk of steel so that I know exactly what orientation has to go in. If I take that off, I don't want to find myself putting this on accident in the future. Plus, then I'll also know where it goes. If I remove that bracket, well, I'll forget that it actually goes on this exact bracket underneath the steering column. Okay, so we're kind of reaching a close here. One of our last electrical connectors will be this yellow guy. So it's a bullet connector with a yellow bullet insulator on it, which is a little comical. But if we look over towards the fuse box, it's got a female perfect identical female end ready to receive it. And this will be just kind of like twist tied, zip tied onto some of the wiring in here. But this goes to a little green plug, and that plugs into the only standing embossment on the fuse panel, and it's kind of right in the center. But like I said, it's kind of the only one that's standing up. You can see that the tan embossment that goes into it's much taller than the rest of it. There are a couple on the left here, but you want the one in the center. And it should be for the one that's labeled cruise control. I can't quite see from this angle, but maybe you can see it on the screen. So it simply plugs into that. So we will be removing it, and we will remember that's exactly where it goes. And you can see it's special because this has to receive a blade type fuse. So now that we have that off, not to lose it, we will plug it into where it belongs. It's kind of been the theme here if you haven't noticed in the background. I know I haven't brought it up until now, but it's extremely important. You don't want to be losing or misplacing or mistaking any of these things. There we go. Got it clicked in like so. All right, now we get to the final piece. And it's kind of a two-part deal. Excuse me. Steering wheel. Okay. So I know the steering wheel is the most important part, and it's what everyone presumes is the easiest part. Well, yes and no. Because to convert a non-cruise control car to a cruise control car, this is obviously a must. Unless you have the dealer cruise, which is on a stock, which is pretty neat. But most dealers would actually end up installing just the full unit because, like I said earlier, and you can probably tell from what I'm showing you, it is just plug and play. Alright, so this is the last switch, and it goes onto this plate. This plate is accessed behind the steering wheel. So before you can get to that plate, the steering wheel must come off. The center piece here, it's merely pushed in, and I find the best way to get it out is get your fingers underneath here, slide it down just a tad. You'll kind of open a little bit of way there, and then again, still only using fingernails, pry it up and out. And you'll see exactly how this goes in. It's just two round locking, okay, like $half, and it goes into these vinyl locking receiving tabs on the steering wheel. After you get to that, there is a 24mm nut on your steering column shaft. You will remove that, and then you will use a but basically a 2-bolt puller is really all you need for this. You just use 2 metric bolts. Out it comes. Or you can use a specialized steering wheel puller. Now, that's an option too, but it's definitely not necessary. So you'll use that puller to get this wheel off the shaft. Depending on how rusty it is, this can be on there really freaking good. But you can tell all the metal on this one's awfully clean. So I simply had to use the puller just to get it started, and then it slid right off. And a lot of the times that's how it's going to be. But this is the back side of our cruise control steering wheel. You can see it's got 3 copper traces, and it will run the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons off of those 3 traces. And I presume it's just because it's connecting. There's 3 of them here, so they can be connected, and when you're connecting them 2 at a time, there's 1, 2, 3 combinations. And then of course you can have all 3 down. So I think 4 combinations is what you could potentially have, and there's 5 buttons. So I'll have to take this apart sometime, because I've never actually operated cruise control on any of these cars. Because the only car of mine that has it, that's in running condition, is the my red 81 Wing. That had factory cruise, and it's temperamental about when it's working, and when it seems like it's working, I'm pretty confident it's not. So there's that done with. Okay, so once you have the steering wheel off, you will see this residing on the steering column. Now, this metal plate that you see here is not necessary. The car that it's going into should have this exact plate. But so I don't lose the screw that connects the little 3-prong spring-loaded switchy. So I don't lose that screw. It's a very specific screw that I don't want to have to replace, being I already have one. I thread it into the plate. I remove the plate. The 2 screws that hold the plate onto the steering column, I threaded those back into the column. We are done on the interior side. All that is ready for swapping. So that means that the last, absolute final piece of the puzzle is the throttle cable. The throttle cable isn't all that crazy special, anything like that. The operation is extremely simple. You will have your throttle cable sticking into the firewall like so. The one that connects the pedal to the gas, the carburetor, throttle body, whatever. So I don't have any with me because they're all in storage, but on your intake manifold there will be a steel metal bracket. It will look identical to this. Regardless of what year and model of trim you have, it will look like that. And this bolts into it, because the cables, they both come into here. Well, there's a receiving plate oriented like this, so you thread a screw through this little hole. It mounts your throttle cable, and you click that onto the carb. Once that's on the mount on the carb, you'll come by with this. Now down here, there's kind of this foot-shaped thing that goes into an oblong hole on that steel bracket we talked about on the intake manifold. Once you do that, there is a steel pin, that will go through that hole, and it'll pass through into a locking hole again on that intake bracket. Click it in. It's clicked in, locked in place. That's secured. We move on to the final piece. The absolute last thing you have to do is connect the vacuum motor to your throttle cable, and that's terribly simple. It just goes into here like so. I think I have found that the easiest way to do it is like such. Kind of click into place, and then eventually it'll get in so that the little stem on the end of your throttle cable goes into the little hole on your vacuum motor cable. And that plastic part, it only clips in, so make sure you're not breaking that. That would be a big problem. You won't have cruise control if you break that. And then after that, that's it. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward swap. I don't see why anyone could have any issues with it. Now I know you're all going to ask, well, what about swapping AC into an AC car? Well, I do have a video on that. That is not a straightforward process. It is possible, but it's entirely impractical. Because for AC to be in the car, you have to relocate a few things on your firewall. Unless you have dealer air. If you have dealer air, that's a whole different story. I believe I have a video on that as well. But to put in factory AC, forget it. It's just not really going to happen. See, you have to drill a few new holes in the firewall. You have to plug a few old holes. And just like the cruise control swap, you need an entire donor car. If you don't have a donor car, it's not going to happen. So that's how that goes. But that's really it. You know, your vacuum motor bolts onto the strut tower. That, again, like I said at the beginning, that's the only thing that I haven't removed yet, which means that's the last thing I need to remove. After I remove that, I'll put all this cruise control, all the vacuum lines, the throttle cable, and the vacuum motor, the speedometer cable sensor, all the bracketry for the vacuum switch, and then all the electrical underneath the dash and the steering wheel. All that will be set in a box, label it, store for the car it's going into. Should be a blue EXP. So we'll take a non-cruise control EXP and we'll put all this in along with the blue dash and the dealer air, which is part of my blue dashboard. So everything this had is going straight into a blue EXP. And then the car will be pretty loaded. We'll have many options. I just have to pick which. We do have we got 4 of these blue 82s. So I just need to decide which one I want to have a blue dashboard and go from there. So with all that said and done, I'll bid you adieu and we'll see you in another video soon.